The visual pun I chose for this example is clothes captioning. I thought this was appropriate given the current state of creating videos and trying to transcribe them as well. I'm going to give you an overview of how I created this, although yours might be slightly different. Hopefully it gives you a starting point. I'm going to start a new file in Photoshop. It's already set up to be 8 inches by 10 inches as per the assignment requirements. You can do a portrait or landscape. That's up to you. And I've set it to 200 pixels per inch. So here's my artboard, and it's only got one layer. That's the background layer. It's already automatically created. And here I should probably start by looking for images that are going to help with this. I just started with a Google image search for shirts. And here's one that's reasonable. So when you select an image, you can right-click on it and then hit Save Image As. Make sure you hit Save Image As and not Save Link As. Also, make sure that the file format is compatible with Photoshop. JPEG is fine, PNG is fine, GIF is fine. When I come to Photoshop, I'm going to select Place Embedded. This means it places the image within the Photoshop file. I don't have to worry about losing it. I select the t-shirt and place it. Notice it creates a new layer for the image, and I can position or resize it. I'm holding Alt here to make sure that it stays centered as I scale it. And then that's good. Now let's go look up the closed captioning logo. Here's an image from Wikipedia, so I'm going to grab that one and do the same thing. This one's coming in as a PNG. Notice that there is also an SVG here. Delete that part of the file name. It's not a good idea to have extra extensions in the file name. Back in Photoshop, I can do the same workflow. This time I'm going to pick the CC logo. I want this to be a little bit smaller. I'm also going to move it up. One of the requirements for this assignment is that it looks somewhat photorealistic. The edges of the logo are pretty sharp. One way to help with the photorealism is to make it so it's not quite so sharp. I'm going to start work on the edges with the blur tool. The blur tool is located here. Notice the no way symbol. If I click, I get a warning message. That's because the content on this layer is a vector object. If I want to modify it, I must turn it into a raster object. I'm going to select OK because I do want to modify it. As I use the blur tool, notice that it smears or blurs the edges. This makes them a bit softer. If I were to zoom out here again, you'll notice that it looks a little bit more realistic around that edge. Also notice the shirt image is a bit grainy. That is not exactly what I was hoping for. I'm showing things to you in this order because this is exactly the order I worked with. I downloaded a file and started working with it before I realized that this is not exactly what I wanted. This is perhaps not the best workflow, but it is realistic. Before going on, I'm going to save the file. I've decided that I also want a little bit more color, so I'm going to search for a red t-shirt. I'm going to click on the Tools link. and I'm going to change the size to large. This is relative, but at least it is going to get me images that are higher quality. I have turned off the white t-shirt layer, but left it in place. I'm going to place the red t-shirt. I'm going to make the shirt a bit larger. I'm going to move that layer below the layer with the CC logo. I am also going to move the logo so that it is more centered on the shirt. And there's a good start. I actually want to use a different logo. Maybe something like this would be better. Rather than delete everything, I'm going to hide that layer. This logo is made of 3 simple shapes. I can easily create those in Photoshop. I'm going to start with a new layer. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it CC Logo. Now I'm going to use the rectangle tool. Black is already set as the foreground color. But if I want a different foreground color, I could double-click that and pick something else. So I'm going to make a black square. There's my starting shape. The next part is the center, which is a rounded rectangle. I'm going to switch the foreground and background colors. This can be done by clicking this button or by hitting X. I'm going to use the rounded rectangle tool and draw a rounded rectangle inside. Notice that Photoshop created a new layer for it. I now want to increase the corner radius. I'm going to change it to 80. Here's the official logo. You can see it is not just the corners that are rounded. The sides are too. To get that shape, I need to modify the rounded rectangle. I'm going to use the direct selection tool. I'm going to click on a point, and then while holding Shift, I will pull out the handle. It will ask if I wanted to turn it into a path. The answer is yes. I'm again going to click on the point and drag the handle while holding Shift. I will do the same down here and on this one. That's a bit closer to the shape I want. The top and bottom of this shape have a bit more curve. I can add anchor points using the pen tool. Using the direct selection tool again, I can move those just a bit. And that is closer still to what I want. I can do another transform while holding Alt. If I just drag the shape while holding Alt, it will stay centered and scale uniformly. If I also hold Shift, it will distort in the selected direction. Now I need to create this tail. I'm going to use the pen tool. on the CC logo layer. I'm going to come down below the left edge of the screen and click. Move over to the center of the screen, and then come back up and to the left a little bit. Then I will click on the first point to finish it. Now I can make adjustments if I want. I'm going to use the direct selection tool to move that up just a little bit. It looks like I could move the bottom point over just a bit more. And I'm going to hold the Shift key because I like where it is vertically. Control 0 will zoom out. Now I'm going to select these shapes and group them by hitting Control G. Now I'm going to select both layers by holding Shift while left clicking. Then I will right click and select Merge Layers. Now to make it look a little bit more realistic, you'll notice that the logo is very sharp around the edges. Let's use the blur tool. I'm going to zoom in and start working around the edges. I'm working around the inside of the screen now with the blur tool, but I do want to point out a couple of things. You can see there is a bit of pixelation around the inside of the screen. You can see it better if I zoom in. I can get rid of some of that with the blur tool. I want to point out that it is possible to use blur too much. Be careful to avoid overusing the blur tool. The blurred edges make this look more realistic. I also want to apply a filter to this. I'm going to use the Add Noise filter. We will look at filters in more detail later. The noise filter can add a grainy appearance, and you can add too much. But adding about 1% will make this look more like it is printed on a shirt. The texture looks better, but the perspective is off. Now the last thing to do here is to modify the perspective because the shirt's at a slight angle and the top of this caption window appears to be just horizontal, and so it doesn't quite look right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the selection tool, and I'm just going to draw a box around the object I want to select. Notice that I'm on the rounded rectangle layer, and now I can come to Edit, and I'm going to do a transform, and in this case I'm going to use a distort. There's lots of options here, but the distort is going to let me fairly easily transform this. So I can pull the top up a little bit and the bottom down a little bit, and then I can move this a little bit that way, and then a Control D will, and Enter will finish that, and a Control D will deselect everything. And I am finished. The edges are blurred, texture is added with a filter, and the perspective is adjusted.